Cunningham here with Phil Long. In our topic today, we're kind of to that mid-season time frame where we need to start looking between the rows to see what might be affecting our soybean crop outside of the dry weather that we're all experiencing this season. So, Phil, what are some things that you're thinking about looking for at this point?
Sure, yeah, it seems like we've talked about the dry weather for long enough. We have gotten some much needed rains, which is great. It does seem like it's going to take quite a bit to really, recharge that soil profile. But today I want to talk a little bit about the other side of this. As our crops kind of get stressed, we see them in different phases of stress. That also sends a signal, just like we have hormones, plants have hormones, and they send signals out, and the insects can see that they're stressed, unfortunately. So it's kind of a double whammy sometimes when it comes to, drought stress and insect pest or disease. Sometimes we just end up getting a lot of them at one time. But I want to talk about a couple of the insect pests that might be showing up in some of our soybean fields. And the first one is kind of showing up early in most cases, what we're used to seeing anyway, is soybean aphid. Soybean aphid, as we all know, it stays on the buckthorn plants up north and then kind of moves, from there after it's done over winter. And this really is kind of a little bit early for when we see it. We usually start to really worry about that reproduction time period, so July into August, and I should back up here. Soybean aphid, most people know what they look like, the little green bodies that are fluid filled, and that's what they do. They suck the fluid or the sap, the juices of sugar from the soybean plant, which is how it can be extremely detrimental. Soybeans are detrimental to, aphids, soybean aphids, and any aphid in general is extremely detrimental because they're in such high numbers, they can reproduce so quickly, and that's how they really attack plants. And so in terms of soybean aphid, they're just kind of showing up a little earlier than normal. One of the things you want to remember about that is everybody has a little different way of scouting, but when we go out, we like to see 250 aphids per plant. Now it seems like a lot. If one thing I usually use is if you're seeing aphids, you start at the top because they like that lush green. They're going to go to the better plants. They actually seek out the more healthy plants in the soybean field. And then they work their way down from the top, basically the most lush leaves on down to the ones that would be older. If you're seeing soybean aphids on the stem of the plant, a lot of times that indicates pretty high concentrations, so they probably may already be over that 250 threshold for spraying. So just a little quick indicator there, but make sure, especially with aphids, that you're scouting more than just one area or maybe the field edge or something like that. Get out there and scout several different areas because they like I said, they go to those healthy areas, and you want to make sure that you're making a decision to spray based on the field, because obviously when you spray an insecticide, you're wiping out everything out there. Most of them are going to kill all the beneficials that might be out there trying to reduce those populations. So just important to remember, obviously we want to keep our plants, the soybean plants, healthy when we've got good prices like this, but it's also important to weigh the costs. What are you setting back things that you shouldn't set back. So the beneficials are important too.
Okay, so soybean aphids is the first one. What's another one that you're looking for right now?
Yeah, so the other one I want to talk, actually these next two are kind of grouped, I'd say, on the field edge, where I don't typically recommend to scout, but this is where they're going to start to show up. The first one is a somewhat new pest, the soybean gall midge. It's one that we've talked about here for the last couple of years. And unfortunately, as of today, it seems like a broken record, but we don't have much more to report other than it's in about 114 counties in Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, South Dakota. All of Latham country basically encompasses that area around that Missouri River. Unfortunately, it's just kind of expanding from there the last couple of years. So it seems to be a devastating pest, especially on those field edges. And we're standing kind of by the edge of the field. It does move from grassy areas. So if you know that you have a grassy area or waterways or just heavy grass areas, that's where they tend to move in the field edge from. So make sure to scout those. If you're seeing issues, that edge of the field, it's going to move in, and sometimes it can be total 100% yield loss on the edge, and then kind of stagger down from there. So the one thing about this pest is it's a midge. It's going to attack the adults, the fly midge or whatever. It's not what's actually harming the plant. The part that's harming the plant is the larva. So those midges are going to come up. They overwinter in the soil and the crop residue, and they come out of overwintering, and then they'll fly around and land and lay their eggs towards the base of on the stem of the plant. And then those larvae come out and start feeding. Unfortunately, there's more than one generation that they've found so far, and this is the challenge with insecticidal control. Those larvae are feeding on the inside of the stem. They burrow in and they get in the middle of the stem, and you can't really touch them at that point. The only ability to really control the gall midge is when it's outside, which is when the midge is actually landing, moving around the different areas of the field and landing on the soybean stem. And that's really a tough thing to establish a time frame on, and they're still doing research on this, so it'll be ongoing. We'll learn more every year. Different treatments, we've talked about seed treatments and different insecticidal controls, and so I'm sure this year we'll have some good information come at the end of the year too. It's just a lot of factors for this one, but it's just a pest that makes it really hard to control because it's on the inside of the stem, far away from where we can really touch it. Insecticide, the insect has to walk through it or move through it somehow, and there's just not that many chances for it to do that. So that's a tough one. It's one that is moving much further east now, coming into Iowa, especially in Minnesota. So that's one that we're going to keep our eye on, especially in terms of varietal resistance and so forth. So unfortunately, not great news to report there, other than make sure that you're watching for those fields, because if you have it, that's something that you want to, we talk about crop planting, that's something that you want to know going forward, because as we learn about some of these varietal resistances and so forth, you want to have that tracked in your plan of which fields have it and where.
All right, very good. What about a third one?
Yeah, so the last one is going to be the one that we've mentioned it maybe once before here this year, and that's the spider mites. Spider mites tend to be an issue in dry years, and I don't think we're over that hump. I wish we were, but we're going to probably still have issues of spider mites in some fields. Similar scenario. They're going to set up on the the outside edge of the field, the kind of the rim around the edge of the field. These do not have a threshold. It's kind of just I don't want to say best guess. There's easy ways to figure it out, but what I usually do is I go out, I take a white piece of paper on a clipboard or something, go out there, get in the soybean canopy, and tap some of the soybean plants, and if you see those little red things start showing up on your paper, those are going to be those spider mites. So that's the easiest way to figure it out. And then I usually work in, just like I mentioned with the gall midge, work in from the outside in, see how far that they're getting. Obviously, if it's a high level, you have a lot of them showing up on your white piece of paper there, it's going to look, speckled or yellow. It kind of looks to me like sandblasting in a way. They'll really start to show up that the plant is stressed, and then you can move in the field from there and make a diagnosis. Do we need to? Typically, you don't have to spray the whole field, but if it's something where they can just like aphids, high numbers really quickly suck a lot of that sap out and do damage to those plants. So you want to make sure that that's protected. So, like I said, the edge of the field, that's ideal for the 55-mile-an-hour scout. Although I don't recommend that. It's easier to see those edges and the damage that things are causing. So make sure that you're scouting those, jump out of the truck and see what's going on, especially if it's a gall midge, because that's going to be an issue going forward, and we're going to keep trying to figure out the best control management strategies for that one.
All right, thanks for those tips today, Phil. Time to get out in the fields, look between the rows, consider some things that might be still affecting our soybean fields even though it is dry this year. So
yeah, exactly. And make sure too on the spider mites, that's a mite, so check your insecticide label and make sure that it does cover mites and so forth. So
all right, great. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back next week with another topic.